Welcome to another episode of the Midweek podcast for First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. I'm here today with my good friend and our co-host, affectionately known as Cracker Jack, Teak Hamilton. Teak, how are you today, buddy?
I'm good, Jerry. I'm good.
Listen, Teak is our MVP. Last week we introduced something that's coming up this weekend, and I'd like for you to tell us about it, Teak.
This Saturday is Sermon on the Mound, and to say I'm excited is probably an understatement. But to say that Eli Espinoza is excited is an understatement also. We're going to be out there at the park, going to play softball. We got lots of stuff planned. I'm excited.
So you and Eli are going to be at the ballpark playing baseball.
We've probably already practiced 12 times by now. I don't know.
What Teak means, or in addition to Teak and Eli, we're having a party out there.
Yeah, we're going to have hot dogs. We're going to have Cracker Jacks. We're going to have, because I did find out those are in season. Eli told me that they're in season, so that's good. We're going to have on-field games because a lot of times when you get out there for a softball game, maybe the kids don't have something to do, but we're going to have something for little kids, do the in-between inning games. Going to interview some people. I'm even going to try to do the on-field interview. Like in MLB right now, they'll put like a mic on a player and they'll interview them. We're going to see if we can do that live, see how that goes. It's going to be fun.
Well, Teak hasn't been sleeping lately, thinking of things that he can do for this. One of the things that he did before he and Stacy went on their hiking expedition last weekend is he made us a good promo video. We saw it Sunday. Those that stayed for the end of the service saw the promo video, and you'll be seeing that on our media this week. So be sure and tune into all those things, all those platforms, and you'll have the opportunity to see what I have said is Teak's finest moment. Now, maybe I meant that just in terms of video production.
Maybe. I hope so.
But I didn't really think about, I guess that is what I was saying.
I hope so.
Surely you've had finer moments than that.
Yeah, it was a fun video to make. It was quick. Waited. Stacy came home. She was my videographer, and she came home after school, and we fought the setting sun.
There you go, and it's really funny. It's a really good video. Appreciate you doing that. So this week we wrapped up our series on Joy Always by finishing the book of Philippians in chapter 4, and obviously we've talked about a lot of the good things that in Philippians, but we didn't cover everything. You feel free to go back through that and maybe hit some of the spots that we didn't hit in terms of the text, or you can review some of the things that we've talked about. But it's a really good time. My Bible now is there goes our first prop. Anyways,
I was thinking about Joy while you were talking about that.
You know, the prop stood up during the first take.
Yeah, I did. So what are these?
These are a couple of cards that were left anonymously in our office last week. And so we want to thank Anonymous for the specially curated gifts that were inside the bags.
Yep.
We appreciate it. And anyway, that's the note cards.
Those gifts, they were on the desk waiting for us. And like you said, everyone was different and had specifically our likes in them.
Right.
So it was exciting.
Yeah, it was lunch that day for me, so I appreciate it very much. So that's kind of where we've been. This is one of the weeks. Our calendar has been a little different this year, the way we've developed our message series. But this is sort of that swing week where it's kind of in between two series. And I had originally, some time ago, planned on doing a series on prayer, but opted this time to do some other things, and then that made this week the week that we're going to talk about prayer. So
that's what we're talking about this week is prayer.
And
that's actually pretty difficult for a lot of people, I would think. And
right.
I'm excited we're talking about it.
Well, it's, when you start talking about prayer, you get a couple of reactions. One is that people, it's almost condescending because they're so familiar with it and it's so much a part of their life. But then you do run into people in faith that struggle with a discipline of prayer. And I think that really Sunday I won't be spending so much time talking about prayer as a discipline as prayer as we would view prayer as a conversation.
Yeah, I think conversation is a good word to use there. And I think too often we get into routine of prayer And it might even start as early as when we're kids, because parents are helping us learn what prayer is, and they're teaching us kind of the form of it and the times that you pray. And it's hard to continue to grow in that, because it seems like a very private thing to do, but I'm excited that we're going to talk about it in the form of conversation where other people are in that.
Yeah, I don't know how this has fleshed itself out in your life, but for me, early on, I had a pretty strict discipline of prayer, and then learned maybe some of the broader aspects of it. Kind of I know I use this way of thinking a lot of times, that at that point my life was kind of zoomed in and real laser focused, but pretty rigid and disciplined. And through experience and through time, it's taken more of a panoramic view.
Right.
And I think when we start to look at our life of prayer, I think a healthy balance creates for us that wide lens view for our life. So.
Richard Foster's book, On Prayer, was one of the things that just kind of first opened me up to there's more than what I was praying for. And there's more ways to pray, because he goes through the scripture and says, here are the basic forms of prayer, and here's more prayers, and here's examples of prayers. And each chapter is an expansion on what prayer is and the different things you're praying for and how you pray. And it was really good for me.
One of the things that we've talked about, or you and I've talked about, is the idea of journaling prayers.
Right.
And how do you do that?
Well, that's one of those things that has developed for me, because I'm not a good journaler. I've never been a good journaler. But one of the things I've become intentional with is when it comes to prayer, especially as ministers, we get asked to pray at a lot of events and stuff. If I just do that from the hip, or I just pray in that moment, it becomes the same thing over and over again, especially like a funeral. And so I'll sit down ahead of time and write out a prayer and be specific to that circumstance, that situation, instead of just saying, comfort the family, be with the family, heal our hearts, things like that, which are all good and meaningful, but it means more to me, and I think it means more to everyone there when it's scripted, when I've written it out. And that's not a bad thing. I think we think sometimes that we lose the impact or the heart of a prayer if we write it out ahead of time. I would say the other side is true, that when you sit down and you write a prayer out, it's much more intentional, it's much more heartfelt than just saying the same thing over and over again. I can remember growing up that the offering prayer, a lot of times you could predict by who was praying what words were going to be consistent in there, and how they would pray, and how long or how short it would be. And I think that's one of those things that when I know I'm going to be praying, even at services, like we'll do Advent and Lent and things like that, I script out those prayers of what I'm going to pray.
Well, and following that up, we talked about how for people who are looking for new life in their prayer life, that having a prayer journal of the sort of description that you had there, of where we actually write out our prayers rather than just write out a prayer list in a journal. We write out, we pray our prayers through paper and pen.
Right. And rather than just writing out the prayer needs and how they were answered, which is good practice also, but prayer journaling, I think, is, like you said, truly just writing down the prayers that you have and the emotions that you have in that moment.
And one of the things that I learned in keeping a prayer journal in my early faith days, was that it gives you the opportunity to go back and see how God's answered prayers. Right. And one of the models for me was someone who actually, they would go back, and anytime they saw God answer a prayer that they had written, they would use a highlighter. And so that prayer journal for them became a book of God's answers. Right. And something that was real visual for them, and something that really also created inspiration for continuing to pray.
The book of Psalms probably is a pretty good representation of what a prayer journal should look like.
Yeah.
All of our emotions.
Yeah. So, but that's certainly a part of it, is discovering this conversation that we have with God. One of the things that we use the word conversation intentionally at First Baptist Sweetwater, and the reason we use that word is that we want people to be aware that there's engagement that's involved in a conversation, and it's not something where I'm trying to convince you of something or you're trying to convince me, but it's something that we can both be better and also through that maybe synergize and come up with more thought about what any particular topic is about.
Right. And I think when you say conversation, there's always the listening part,
Right.
and sometimes that's the hardest part of prayer, is to listen.
Right. And there's different disciplines. It'll be hard Sunday. I think that's the challenging part on speaking on prayer in a 25-minute window of time, is that you kind of walk that tightrope of, telling people what they already know, but, creating some inspiration to continue that journey, or to even inspire a new part of that journey through that prayer life.
Right, taking that next step.
Yeah. But one of the things I also want to do is point toward some things that we believe that we could be praying about as a church or as individuals in our community of faith. There's a lot of things that are in our future that we're not aware of, but we want to be prepared for what God's doing.
Right. This prayer conversation that we're having Sunday has been an evolution of the time that you've been here too. I mean, it's like grown. Right. We led people through Circle Maker and talked about praying big, bold prayers and how that relates to our faith development. But it's been a constant conversation for us, and I think we're growing in it.
Right. And one of the things that I've been doing this fall and will continue to do for a good while is write a Bible study that goes with each of our conversation pieces on Sunday. It creates a continuation of the conversation. They're available on our website at fbcsweetwater.org, or you can pick up a hard copy on Sundays in our information on our information table. But as we were talking about this, I think one of the questions that can be sort of that challenge or motivation for us as we work towards something together as a church, as a body of believers, and that question would be, what's your bold prayer?
Right.
If we could start a conversation, then that would be at least for this season, for this short season anyways, a good place for us to start. And we hope that between now and Sunday that we'll even start being inspired towards those certain bold prayers that God's placed in our heart.
So is it safe to say that a bold prayer, if you can achieve the bold prayer on your own, it's not a bold prayer?
That's a very good description of that.
I'm sure I've heard that somewhere.
Probably so. But I think that sums it up real well about what a bold prayer would be. That it is that part of our life that we know that it's not going to come to fruition or not have an answer outside of God's actions.
Right.
And so it keeps us connected, closely connected to God in our relationship and in our conversation with Him.
I think we talked about earlier about how a lot of times our prayers kind of boil down to health needs and things like that. But there's so much more to it, and I think a lot of times those bold prayers are stepping outside of just that format also, and saying you want to see God do big things that maybe you don't expect.
Right. It's kind of painting on the edges, or maybe outside the edges.
Right.
Anyways.
Okay with that.
Well, each Sunday we look forward to being a part of your worship, whether it's live with us or on live stream. It's a good time for us to connect and to continue this conversation. Teek and I look forward to seeing you this Sunday.
See ya.